He crossed the world in search of safety, leaving Brazil to start a new life in San Francisco, California. But fate had an unimaginable tragedy in store for him, triggered by something as simple as complimenting a dog on the street. That day, Mateus set out to make a flower delivery, never imagining that it would be not only his last delivery of the day, but the last delivery of his life. Mateus Gaidos grew up in the east zone of the city of São Paulo in Brazil. He was Isabel Martinez's only son. Those who knew Mateus in his youth describe him as an extremely calm, cheerful, and helpful man. Friends said he was a very good-hearted boy who wouldn't think twice before helping anyone who was going through difficulties. Mateus had hobbies common to any young man his age. He loved spending time playing video games with friends, frequented the gym regularly, enjoyed taking outdoor walks, and had an enormous passion for traveling. But above all, Mateus had a genuine and deep love for animals, especially dogs. A terrible irony of fate, as it would be precisely this love and the habit of interacting with animals that would seal his end. As the years passed with Mateus living in São Paulo, the fear of public insecurity began to weigh on the young man's shoulders. The urban violence of the capital frightened Mateus and his family members. He felt he needed a place where he could walk the streets without constantly looking over his shoulder, fearing robberies or assaults. It was in search of this tranquility and a better quality of life that in the year 2018, Mateus made a decision. He packed his bags, said goodbye to his relatives, and left for the United States. Upon landing on American soil, Mateus chose the San Francisco metropolitan area, one of the largest and most important cities in California. In this city, he decided to establish his residence. Like the vast majority of Brazilian immigrants, he knew that life abroad would require a lot of effort and hard work. Mateus was not afraid of work. During the 5 years he lived in the United States, he worked in different roles, always focused on saving money and planning his future. Lately, he had found stability working as a flower delivery person in the city of Oakland, a city right next to San Francisco. According to sources, Mateus quite enjoyed this job. It was something calm and relatively easy to do. The work consisted of carrying bouquets and delicate arrangements, taking messages of affection, celebration, or comfort to residents of the region. Mateus crossed the streets of Oakland daily aboard his work vehicle. He already knew the routine of the city's neighborhoods well. For those who don't know, the city of Oakland has some areas with high crime rates, especially in neighborhoods dominated by gangs. On some occasions, Mateus needed to go to these neighborhoods to make deliveries. But despite the danger, nothing had ever happened to him in those locations. He maintained daily contact with his family and friends in Brazil via the internet. Online gaming continued to be his main form of leisure and a way to ease his homesickness. Even being thousands of miles away, he connected almost every night with his cousins and childhood friends to play and talk. The year 2023 marked an important transition period for the young Brazilian. Mateus had already been in California for half a decade. He felt that the cycle of living far from his homeland was nearing its end. The longing for his mother, friends, and his native land began to speak louder. Mateus started planning his definitive return to Brazil. He had already told his family in São Paulo that he would be back in just 2 months. That season of work in Oakland would be his last. He was finalizing his professional commitments, organizing his savings, and preparing for his return to the comfort of his original home. Mateus was happy, full of plans for restarting his life in his country, feeling that his mission abroad had been successfully accomplished. He could hardly imagine that only a few weeks remained before everything was interrupted. June 21st, 2023 was a Wednesday and it was summer in California. Around 6:30 p.m., Mateus headed out to make a flower delivery. This delivery would be the last of the day since his shift was ending. After delivering, Mateus would return to the company he worked for and then to his house. But the saddest thing is that this was not only going to be Mateus's last delivery of that day, but it was also the last delivery of his entire life. Well, Mateus parked the car near a residential apartment building located on a busy street in the city. He got out of the vehicle carrying a beautiful flower arrangement in his hands and then walked toward the building entrance to locate the recipient. At the same time, Mateus was doing something he did frequently. He was talking to his friends and cousins in Brazil. He was wearing headphones and was connected to a voice call with the group while they played an online game. His friends could hear the ambient sound of the street and Mateus's voice in real time. While walking on the sidewalk in front of the apartment complex, Mateus crossed paths with a couple walking on the sidewalk. The couple consisted of a 22-year-old local resident and a 20-year-old woman accompanying him. They were carrying two pet dogs with them. Being a great fan of animals and owner of an extroverted personality, Mateus could not resist when seeing the dogs. As he walked right past them, the Brazilian looked at the dogs and spontaneously paid them a compliment. On the other end of the line, in Brazil, the friends who were on the voice call heard Mateus's words perfectly. He said something simple like, "Good dog, nice dog." It was a simple, everyday gesture, the kind of quick interaction people have all the time when they see a cute dog on the street. After that, Mateus smiled and continued on his way to make the delivery. But the reaction of the owner of the two dogs was completely outside the reality of a normal person. The handler of these dogs was later identified as Eric Localveira. For some inexplicable reason and out of pure hostility, Eric clearly didn't like seeing the Brazilian delivery man interacting with his dogs. Mateus's harmless compliment triggered an immediate and disproportionate fury in Eric. The American stopped in the middle of the sidewalk, turned to Mateus and began to shout, initiating an aggressive argument. Mateus, caught totally by surprise by the man's aggressiveness, stopped and tried to understand what was happening. Through the phone call, Mateus's friends in Brazil began to hear the aggressor shouting and swearing. They realized right away that Mateus was involved in a street altercation, but they still had no idea of the gravity of the situation. The entire sequence of events that followed was captured clearly by security cameras installed on the facade of the residential building. The footage, which would later be released by the authorities and the local press, clearly shows the speed of the scene. In the video, it is possible to see the exact moment when Eric Localveira interrupts the walk, turns to Mateus, and gestures threateningly. Demonstrating coldness, Eric passes the dog's leashes to the hands of the woman who was accompanying him, freeing his arms for the physical confrontation. He walks toward Mateus with firm steps, shortening the distance between the two in an intimidating manner. Mateus remained standing, holding the flowers he needed to deliver. The verbal argument quickly escalated to physical aggression at the initiative of Eric. Without there being any threat on the part of the Brazilian, Eric dealt a violent slap against Mateus's face. The blow hit the delivery man and destabilized the young man. Feeling assaulted and humiliated in the middle of his work environment, Mateus had an impulsive reaction of defense. He used the only object he had in his hands at that moment, the bouquet of flowers. Mateus threw the flower arrangement directly at the aggressor's face, trying to push him away. The petals and leaves spread across the sidewalk floor. It was a human reaction of retaliation to a cowardly physical assault. But Eric Localveira's response was fatal. Immediately after being hit by the flowers, Eric brought his hand to his waist. With frightening speed, he pulled out a firearm he was carrying hidden. Without hesitating for a single second, the aggressor pointed the weapon toward Mateus's chest and fired at point-blank range. The dry crack of the shot echoed through the street of Oakland and traveled instantly through the sound waves of the cell phone, reaching the ears of Mateus's friends in Brazil directly. They heard the sound of the shot, and immediately afterward the trembling and weak voice of Mateus, who managed to say a few words on the phone before losing his strength. He warned the friend on the line that he had been shot. The impact of the projectile immediately knocked Mateus to the sidewalk, surrounded by the flowers he was supposed to deliver. The cruelty of the scene was completed with the reaction of Eric and the woman who was accompanying him. After firing the deadly shot at an unarmed young worker, the killer did not show any sign of regret or despair. The security camera footage shows the couple turning their backs on the fallen victim and running away from the scene with the two dogs, as if nothing had happened. They abandoned Mateus bleeding on the sidewalk and disappeared through the streets of the neighborhood. A few minutes later, the local emergency service was called by residents who heard the shot and saw the young man fallen on the sidewalk. Paramedics and police cars from the Oakland Police Department arrived quickly at the crime scene. Mateus received first aid while still on the sidewalk and was rushed into an ambulance, being transported to the nearest emergency hospital. However, the injury caused by the point-blank shot had hit vital organs, causing a very serious internal hemorrhage. Despite all the efforts and medical maneuvers performed by the hospital team, the young Brazilian did not survive. Mateus had his death declared shortly after being admitted to the health unit. The news of Mateus's death crossed the ocean and arrived in Brazil like a bomb. In the East Zone neighborhood of São Paulo, the family received the phone call with total disbelief. The man's mother, Isabel Martinez, collapsed. The son who had left Brazil precisely to escape urban violence, the boy who had his bags almost ready to return home in a few weeks, had been murdered on a sidewalk in the United States. The pain of the loss was accompanied immediately by a deep feeling of outrage and helplessness. Isabel, even while emotionally destroyed, gathered the strength she had left and bought an emergency plane ticket to California. She needed to closely monitor the work of the American police and begin the painful process to bring her son's body back to Brazil. Upon landing in the United States, Isabel collided head-on with the coldness of international bureaucratic procedures. American legislation for homicide crimes requires the performance of detailed autopsy exams by the local coroner's department. In Mateus's case, the procedures were performed by the Alameda County coroner. All this initial investigation caused the release of the documents necessary for the transfer of the body to take weeks. For a mother who mourns the loss of her only son, each day of delay was an indescribable psychological torture. Isabel gave moving interviews to the Brazilian and local American press, classifying the delay of the registry office authorities and the government as something inhumane. She spent weeks staying in California, unable to see her son's body and unable to get a definitive date for the return. In Brazil, relatives held a memorial mass on the 7th day and another on the 30th day after his death, while Mateus's body had not even left the United States. The Consulate General of Brazil in San Francisco began to provide legal and bureaucratic assistance to try to speed up the paperwork with the American bodies, but the legal deadlines needed to be met strictly. While the family faced the ordeal of bureaucracy, the Oakland police worked intensely to get their hands on the person responsible for the crime. Right after the murder on June 21st, the Oakland Police Department began a detailed investigation. The top priority was to identify the couple that appeared in the security camera images. Detectives collected videos from the neighborhood and managed to isolate clear photos of the shooter's face and the woman who accompanied him. The police released these images publicly to television channels and social media, asking for the collaboration of any citizen who knew the whereabouts of the suspects. A financial reward of up to $10,000 was officially offered for any concrete lead that would lead to the killer's capture. The pressure from the media and the mass circulation of the photos caused Eric to fall into despair. Knowing that he was being hunted throughout the California region, he decided to flee the state. He abandoned his residence in Oakland and began an interstate flight, trying to hide in other major American metropolises. The hunt lasted a little over 2 weeks and mobilized different security agencies of the United States, including American federal agents. Eric's escape ended on July 6, 2023, a Thursday. Investigators managed to track the fugitive's movements and discovered that he had traveled more than 1,800 miles before hiding in Chicago, Illinois. In a joint and rapid operation, federal and local police surrounded Eric's hideout in Chicago and arrested him on an outstanding warrant. Eric was handcuffed and taken into police custody. The news of the arrest brought a slight sense of relief to Mateus's family in Brazil, although it did not diminish their grief and pain. Eric Lochelvira was formally charged by the Alameda County District Attorney's Office with murder. The woman who was with him at the time of the crime and was holding the dog's leashes was also formally investigated to determine whether she had played any role in his escape or failed to provide assistance. After the killer was captured, the bureaucratic process to release Mateus's body finally moved forward. Almost 40 days after the crime in California, American authorities issued the death certificate and the documents required to transport his body internationally. The coffin containing Mateus Gaidos's remains was prepared for the flight back to São Paulo, Brazil. The flight arrived on July 30, 2023, a Sunday. There was still one final moment of anguish for the family members waiting at the airport. The flight carrying Mateus's body was delayed by almost 2 hours and finally landed in Brazil at around 9:20 in the morning. From the airport, Mateus's body was taken directly to the east zone of São Paulo, tragically bringing his life full circle. The wake was filled with grief and emotion. Dozens of childhood friends, neighbors, cousins, and uncles came to pay their final respects to the man everyone remembered as cheerful, hard-working, and full of dreams. At the end of that same Sunday, July 30th, Mateus was finally laid to rest at Carmo Cemetery. His mother, Isabel, was finally able to say goodbye to her only son and carry out the burial that had been delayed for so many weeks by the bureaucratic process. Currently, Eric Lochelvira remains behind bars in Alameda County, California. He has pleaded not guilty, but the evidence against him is substantial. Eric's trial has not yet taken place, and no date has been set. Under California law, if convicted, he could face a sentence ranging from 25 years to life in prison. Well everyone, that's it for today's video. Don't forget to leave a like and a comment to support the channel. Thank you so much for watching, take care, and I'll see you in the next video.